Hello again, my name is Jouni Vilkka and this is my channel TFF Teacher from Finland. Today's video answers the question, what is psychology? First, I will list some things psychology deals with and where it is applied. I will mention some psychological tests you may already have encountered or may well encounter in normal life. I will then talk a little about how you might benefit from studying psychology, including the kinds of jobs you might qualify for if you study psychology at university. Lastly, I will discuss the subfields of psychology and their connections to each other and to other sciences. I will include questions characteristic of those subfields to give you a better understanding of their areas of interest and the differences between them. But before we get started, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to my channel and click the thumbs up button. If you don't already think that psychology is a broad field, let me make it clear right from the start that it really is. You are probably already aware of the fact that psychology deals with mental problems, from the very common problems like depression and anxiety to the less common and in some sense more severe like schizophrenia and the locked-in syndrome. But even everyday stress is a psychological phenomenon studied by psychologists. Of course, the goal is to find out what causes it, ways to relieve it or even remove it. The regulation and manipulation of emotions and mood also belong within the scope of psychology. Very broadly, in fact, all human behavior and thinking belongs within psychology. Understanding the differences and similarities between individuals and their actions, as well as the causes of those similarities and differences, are central to psychology. How different circumstances and situations influence people and how people develop and change throughout their lives are all important questions in psychology. The main goal of the field is to explain the workings of the human mind, especially how we think and remember things, to understand our species. For example, communication is central to being human, so studying how we express and recognize different emotions and whether there are cultural differences in such important aspects of communication and experience are important psychological questions. More mundane psychological questions have to do with the psychological evaluation of individuals, for example, in an attempt to find the person best suited for a job. Psychological evaluations are used, for example, in militaries, private corporations, as well as some schools, for selecting candidates for certain positions. Criminals, or the accused, are sometimes also evaluated to see if they are fit for trial, as you no doubt know from TV shows and movies, or perhaps even the daily news. Students with learning difficulties can also be assessed by psychologists to see if there is something that could be done to help them. Everything we do has both an external and an internal dimension. External refers to the behavior as others can observe it. For example, hugging a friend, writing a blog, talking about a teacher with one's schoolmates, or practicing to play guitar. All these can be observed by other people, such as psychologists. Internal, on the other hand, refers to mental experiences like the feeling of joy and the intellectual organization of one's experiences, the regulation of emotions, motivation to play the guitar or to study psychology, and other such things that others cannot observe directly. Only the individual can observe and experience them directly, or to perform those things within their own mind. In addition, there are internal phenomena that even the individual themselves cannot be aware of, or phenomena they might be able to become aware of, but presently are not yet aware of. such as subconscious jealousy. There are several psychological tests used by psychologists in their work. There are also tests claimed to be psychological that you may come across online that are not considered useful by psychologists, even if they were in the past. Some are quite simply pseudoscientific. Some tests, like those testing for intelligence, are frequently hotly debated. IQ tests may be useful, and I do recommend taking them in order to learn something about yourself. A lot of people are afraid of getting a low score because of unfortunate beliefs in the importance of IQ scores and the false belief that one's intelligence cannot be improved. These beliefs should be discarded. You can improve intellectual abilities within an area you focus on, and wisdom is in any case more important than quick intelligence. But IQ tests can be fun and useful to take. If you take several tests and get similar results, it will tell you how well you do in tests like that. That might be relevant for some other things as well, but probably not as much as you might think. Personality tests are probably more interesting. You should try a revised NEO personality inventory test, which you can also do online, to measure your big 5 personality traits, again to learn something about yourself and how to describe yourself, at least to yourself. Don't waste time on that popular test that gives you a 4-letter combination as your personality type, as it is not much more useful than a blood type personality test or a horoscope. I wish I didn't have to clarify that they are all pseudoscientific nonsense. Self-assessments are in general only useful to some degree. Sometimes the reliability of their results can be improved by having others close to the person also give answers about the person. Other tests can be done by professionals, as in the case of psychological evaluations I already mentioned. Sometimes it is useful or necessary to test the subject's reaction speed or other natural aptitudes. Some projective tests are used, such as the thematic apperception test and the infamous Rorschach test. Their usefulness is very limited. Unfortunately, that doesn't stop some recruiters, for example, from using them inappropriately. It's not enough that a test has a scientific basis, it must also be used in the proper manner and for the correct purpose. I will include links about some tests in the description below that you might find interesting. Studying psychology and sometimes taking psychological tests may help you understand yourself and other people better. You may have already practiced contemplation by thinking about your own past, the experiences that have shaped you into who and what you are. If not, I recommend you try that sometimes. But with the help of psychology, your contemplation can improve. You will come across people, perhaps from different cultures, or just with different backgrounds, and of course different experiences than yours. Without the help of psychological knowledge, you may form opinions about them without understanding the significance of these backgrounds. I am not trying to claim that just by studying psychology you will be able to understand all weird human behaviors, because I certainly cannot. But at least you might become less judgmental. Even if you fail to see the benefit in that, others are likely to appreciate it, and thus you. Here is the first, most important connection between psychology and philosophy. As you form your own worldview, and you will do that, whether you do it with conscious effort or not, the central questions that you have to answer are philosophical. What is a human being, and what is the place of such being in this world? Psychology seeks to answer much the same questions, but empirically and experimentally. Studying it helps you answer those questions and thus to form your worldview rationally. Several psychologists are fairly famous for their work within scientific skepticism, the critical analysis of claims about the paranormal and similar oddities. They have used the methods of psychology to test claims about the paranormal, such as the alleged ability to find objects with dowsing. Within school curricula, critical thinking may be more prominent within psychology than most other subjects. I have already discussed critical thinking, including the psychological phenomena known as biases, as part of my course Introduction to Philosophy and Critical Thinking, and will point you that way for more information. See the links in the description. The point here is that studying psychology can help you learn critical thinking. You can, of course, also find a profession for yourself in psychology. There are several options, and it is important to know some distinctions between them. A psychiatrist, for example, is a physician who specializes in psychological disorders, the field of psychiatry. So, in order for you to become a psychiatrist, you have to study medicine first. It is illegal to present yourself as a psychiatrist without the proper credentials, just as it would be illegal to claim to be any other kind of physician, for example, a gynecologist. A psychologist is an academic title for a person who has studied psychology and most likely works in the field. To become one, you have to study psychology at university and get a master's degree. In Finland, once you have your master's degree in psychology, you can get licensed as a psychologist by Valvira, the central agency operating in the administrative sector of the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health. It is illegal to call yourself a psychologist without this license. There are some differences between countries, but usually the main difference between psychologists and psychiatrists is that only the latter are allowed to make medical diagnoses, as they are physicians and psychologists are not. Psychologists also cannot prescribe medications or other treatments. What they can do is make assessments of their own clients or medical patients and advise the psychiatrist or general practitioner in the treatment of their patients. Psychologists can use diagnostic tests and let the medical professionals know the results. But that is not diagnosing the patient. Psychologists, as psychologists, do not typically provide psychotherapy, although they are sort of qualified to do so. This leads us to the next profession in this list. Psychotherapist, at least in Finland, is also a legally protected term, unlike the word therapist alone. That is why there are lots of frauds who like to use the term therapist. It provides an aura of science without requiring the difficult part of actual science. Instead of scientific research to develop the therapy, it can all be based on mere imagination. Several allegedly ancient Eastern therapies are actually rather recent inventions, some of them invented by Americans. Don't be gullible. In Finland, a psychotherapist is licensed by Valvira and can provide some type of therapy to their client. The important point is that the clients of proper psychotherapists licensed by Valvira can get financial support from Kela, the independent social security institution, crucial for the welfare system. This national institution is necessary for covering such expenses, as therapies are typically rather expensive. The reason for the requirement of a license is to prevent fraud, of course. Psychotherapists have been trained in at least one form of psychotherapy, before which they have already had a degree in a suitable field, such as psychology, psychiatry, psychiatric nursing, or, weirdly, theology. It is fairly common for psychologists to also train to become psychotherapists, but it is quite possible to study psychology and never have any interest in psychotherapy. There are many other options available as well, after all. There is also something called brief psychotherapy, which is not a legally protected term. That means anyone can claim to be a brief psychotherapist. That doesn't mean the whole thing is a fraud, though. The purpose of brief psychotherapy is to ease the burden of public health costs from mental health problems and to help people get access to some sort of useful therapy. The idea is that a lot of people suffer from mental health issues that can be helped in a shorter period of therapy, even just one session. But psychotherapists tend to not have available time as they are working full-time or overtime with the clients they already have. So at least those who can afford the cost of a small number of sessions without being reimbursed by Kela can perhaps benefit from brief psychotherapy. If you find yourself interested in psychology and want to just start studying it at university, that is fine, although at least in Finland psychology departments are very difficult to get in, as the field is very popular. Once you're in, at some point you will have to choose a profession within psychology. There are many possibilities, such as school psychologist, vocational guidance psychologist, organizational psychologist, psychological researcher, teacher, and so on. There are several different types of jobs for psychologists just within healthcare alone, and many more outside it. Psychological research is used even in the development of various gadgets or user interfaces, advertising, planning of traffic and living environments, coaching in sports, and so on. It is no wonder psychology is a popular subject. Psychology studies the mind, which is a hugely complicated subject of study, including a large variety of specific topics. Some of the factors important for our development and functioning are studied by natural sciences like biology, chemistry, medicine, and neurology. Others by social sciences like sociology and political science. Yet others are investigated by humanistic fields like linguistics, history, and comparative religion. All of these sciences are thus in some ways connected to psychology and can provide useful input for psychology. While the general goal is to understand how the mind works, there are many different aspects to consider in psychology, and similarly, many different subfields of psychology focused on specific areas of interest. To begin with, developmental psychology tries to explain how our minds develop and change over time. The genetically inherited genes we happen to have are very significant for our development. Our material conditions throughout our lives, and especially during early development, starting with prenatal conditions like exposure to alcohol or other drugs, also play a very important role. For example, intimacy, access to nutrition or lack thereof, homelessness, and other such things play an important part in our development. Our upbringing, authority figures and other adults, as well as our peers in childhood, and the relationships we have with all these people influence us. Even the community and culture we develop in, and the language we grow up using, affect how and into what we develop. Our minds, how we think and behave, depend on our previous development and experiences. Our lives can be seen as a series of developmental stages from infancy to old age. It may be that the earlier stages of life have been considered most interesting in the past, but as important psychological changes occur throughout life, even the last stages of life are now seen as important subjects of developmental psychology. Different stages bring up different questions in developmental psychology. What do babies think about? Does the divorce of a child's parents affect the way they will themselves form relationships as adults? How do changes in mature age influence our thinking? And so on. Cognitive psychology focuses on explaining our thinking and cognitive functions, such as attention, memory, reasoning, problem solving, decision making, and even creativity. The goal is to understand and explain the most basic functioning of the mind. Does playing video games improve cognitive skills? Does it weaken our ability to focus or shorten our attention span? Why is it difficult to focus on studying? Personality psychology is about what we are like as individuals, what makes us different from or similar to each other. What kinds of traits do we have and why do we have them? Why are some more shy than others? How does a person form an image of themselves? Does childhood trauma cause permanent damage? What kind of or which person would be the best suited for a specific job? Mental disorders or problems are of course an important subject for psychology. Clinical psychology is devoted to developing diagnoses, preventing dysfunction, and promoting mental well-being. It also includes the various types of clinical assessment and psychotherapy. What sorts of things increase happiness? What is stress good for? What causes mental disorders? Can they be prevented or cured? Neuropsychology, or biological psychology more generally, is a field of study bridging biology and psychology for the purpose of explaining how psychological phenomena arise from their neurological foundation. It studies the functioning of neurons and neural networks, among other things. What happens in our brain when we lose focus or experience fear? How can medications affect the mind? Does evolution explain how humans form sexual relationships? While psychology is usually understood to be focused on individuals, and the social sciences in general on the functioning of whole societies and other social phenomena, social psychology looks at the interactions of individuals within groups and organizations, or even communities and culture. It can thus be seen as a bridge between the social sciences and psychology proper. It has branched out into a separate science in the sense that, at least in Finland, it is taught as such in universities and not as part of psychology. Social psychologists are especially interested in group dynamics. Why do we care about other people's opinions? Do we make better or worse decisions in groups as opposed to deciding individually? In what ways are people from different cultures fundamentally similar? There are other subfields of psychology that could be listed here as well. For example, the psychology of motivation and emotions, as well as sports psychology and psychology of technology. One of the newest additions is media psychology. More new fields can always be opened up for study, like in any science. Psychology, just like science in general, is not finished with everything already figured out. Far from it. Although professional psychologists may focus on the subfield they are most interested in. All the subfields are of course connected and inform each other. The findings in one of them will be used in others. Research in traffic psychology, for example, utilizes concepts like personality and temperament from personality psychology and schema from cognitive psychology when trying to find causes of road rage. As the phenomenon is a dysfunction related to impulse control, it can be informed by clinical psychology and neuropsychological findings regarding the workings of neurotransmitters, among other things. Other relevant sciences may also provide input helping to explain the phenomenon. For example, sociology could provide insight into the influence of societal power structures and the use of symbols of power in the phenomenon. As this course is just an introduction to the whole field of psychology in general, I will leave such contributions from other sciences out. You may look into them at your leisure. Now you should have a rough idea of what psychology is as a science and what kinds of things psychologists study. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. I hope you'll join me next time when I will provide a brief history of psychology. Bye for now. If you wish to support my channel, please click thumbs up, subscribe and share my videos. Any comments on the videos would also be welcome.